Fare ye well, lords and ladies. Today on LetThemTalkTV, we're going to see how Shakespeare changed the English language. I'm sure you've been waiting for this video with bated breath, and you may have been searching forever and a day, but your wild goose chase is over. We'll look at some of the many words and expressions that we use every day that were coined by Shakespeare. There's a little quiz to test your knowledge of Shakespeare, and we'll also answer the question, was Shakespeare really Shakespeare? All of this in one fell swoop. A special welcome to anybody called Jessica or Miranda. Your names were invented by William Shakespeare, and it's good to see all you managers out there. Yes, believe it or not, Shakespeare coined the word manager. Wilt thou enjoy the video? Yes, yes, and thrice yes. The game's afoot. So, let's go. He didn't invent let's go. Shakespeare wrote his plays between 1580 and 1616. The English spoken at that time we now refer to as early modern English. Yes, you heard me correctly, early modern English, which surprises some people who look at a page of Shakespeare and see it as a different language. But with just a little study and knowing some of the vocabulary that was popular at the time but has since become archaic, such as thou and thee, you can start to appreciate Shakespeare even if you're learning English as a second language. We'll look at that more in a moment. Let's start with a little quiz. How much do you know about the Bard? How many plays did Shakespeare write? Now, this isn't quite as easy to answer as it sounds. There are 36 plays in the first folio, which was the first publication of the complete works of Shakespeare. In addition, there is Pericles, Prince of Tyre, which was written at least in part by Shakespeare, but it wasn't included in the first folio, but it was in the third folio of 1664. The play was probably a collaboration with playwright George Wilkins, who was Shakespeare's neighbour when he lived on Silver Street in London. And as well as being a playwright, Wilkins was a brothel keeper. Two Noble Kinsmen was written by Shakespeare and John Fletcher and first published in 1634. Edward III, now generally accepted to have been written at least in part by Shakespeare but not attributed to him until the 1990s. We also have Sir Thomas More, a rather unremarkable play premiered in London between 1591 and 1593. It was co-written by Anthony Munday and Henry Chettle, but heavily revised by a number of authors, and it would have been largely forgotten had one of those authors not been William Shakespeare. In fact, the page of revisions said to be written by Shakespeare still exists. It's known as Hand D, a 3-page manuscript of handwritten revisions that has been attributed to William Shakespeare. Then there is the Lost Plays, the history of Cardenio, which is probably inspired by a story in Miguel de Cervantes's Don Quixote involving the character Cardenio, and Lovelabour's One. No copy of these has ever been found, and if you come across one of these in your attic, then hang on to it. It could be valuable. What was Shakespeare's longest play? That's Hamlet, 30,557 words. What was his shortest play? The Comedy of Errors, 14,701 words. How many plays are set in Britain, excluding plays about kings? 1. The Merry Wives of Windsor. How many are set in Italy? 10. What is Shakespeare's most popular play today? A Midsummer Night's Dream. And the least popular is Thomas More. What was Shakespeare's last play? That was The Tempest, written between 1610 and 1611. And we know with some certainty when it was written because much of the plot is borrowed from an account of a real shipwreck off Bermuda published in 1609. Where is Shakespeare from? Shakespeare is from Stratford upon Avon, but he moved to London. We're not exactly sure of the date, but he lived in many locations in London. He lived here and here and here and here and here, and I've made a video just about that. Do check it out if it's out yet, and if you're in London you can follow his route. Where did he die? He died on April the 23rd, 1616, on his 52nd birthday. He'd probably been ill for some time, as he'd retired to Stratford and made up his will. He didn't die after a raucous birthday celebration. That's a myth. What about his vocabulary? Well, you know that some of the claims put forward by scholars about Shakespeare are not quite true. Shakespeare's vocabulary is estimated to have been between 20 to 24,000 words, depending on your definition of a word. That's big. Milton only used about 15,000 words, and the King James Bible used about 12,000 unique words, while an educated English person of the day would use 3,000 to 4,000 words. In his 1929 work, The English Language, Ernest Weekly made this hyperbolic claim. Of Shakespeare it may be said without fear of exaggeration that his contribution to our phraseology is 10 times greater than that of any writer to any language in the history of the world. And this myth persists to this day, but it's quite false. Shakespeare did indeed have a large vocabulary, but the reason he used so many unique words compared to his peers is because he wrote a lot of books, 38, plus all the sonnets. Now my vocabulary is fairly average, but if I wrote dozens of books on a wide range of subjects as varied as a journey through Greenland, the architecture of the Aztecs, animal and fish husbandry, the diseases of horses, and my masterpiece, the life and times of avocado scones, I'd probably use more unique words than a great writer who'd retired after his or her first 200-page masterpiece. It's just mathematics. How many words did Shakespeare invent? And the number that crops up again and again is over 1,700. However, this is once again an exaggeration, as many of these words were first recorded in the works of Shakespeare, but they were probably around for much longer. Shakespeare was just the first one to write them down, or they were written down, but the books they were written in haven't survived. For example, did Shakespeare invent the word anchovy? He's the first one to use it in print. Probably not. It had most likely already been in circulation and comes from the Portuguese anchovy, but it is first recorded in Henry IV, Part 1. It is also said that he coined the word bedroom. Did nobody think of calling it that before Shakespeare? Even though the word bed and room had existed for a long, long time. Have you seen my ruff? It's in the sleeping zone, the dozing sanctuary, the slumber quarter, the dream chamber. It's in the room with the bed. In the mid-20th century, the Oxford English Dictionary cited Shakespeare as the first recorded source of 3,200 words. In recent editions, this has fallen to 1,700. Earlier researchers didn't have research tools that we do today. These days we have a wealth of digital resources. Then there was no Ngram or Google Books to help find the original source as there is today. The number of words actually coined by Shakespeare is probably a few hundred. Still a significant number, and here are a few. And as many non-native English speakers watch this channel, I'm going to give an example in modern English for some of the words that you might not know, and I'll only give the original Shakespeare quote when it's interesting. Bedazzled. Shakespeare used it to mean that your vision is altered by the sun. Pardon, old father, my mistaking eyes that have been so bedazzled with the sun. In modern English, it has the meaning of visually amazed by an outstanding display. For example, the audience was utterly bedazzled by the movie's 3D special effects. Gloomy, which means dark or negative and can be used literally or figuratively, the outlook is rather gloomy for the economy. Gossip. Grovel. Grovel means to act in an excessively submissive way. The thief grovelled before the judge for leniency. Jaded. If you lack enthusiasm, often because you've had too much exposure to something, you can say that you're jaded. Mass tourism has left many travellers jaded by the whole experience. Cold-blooded, which means cruel and heartless, like the cold-blooded YouTube algorithm. There's fashionable, obscene, eyeball, rant, that's prolonged angry shouting. For the whole meeting, the boss was ranting about not meeting sales targets. Skim milk. Undress, from Taming of the Shrew. Madam, undress you and come now to bed. Ah yes, my favourite chat-up line, and I got it from Shakespeare. Zany, which means weird and wonderful, but in a good way. He's got a zany sense of humour. Zany is a corruption of zani, which is Venetian dialect for the name Gianni. Then there's lonely, worthless, newfangled, more clamorous than a parrot, against rain, more newfangled than an ape, more giddy in my desires than a monkey. I will weep for nothing, as you like it. In modern English, newfangled means different and unfamiliar, and not in a good way. I can't order this from the newfangled machine. Can't we just call the waiter? Swagger, walking in a bold and arrogant way. A rascal that swaggered with me last night. A modern example, the rock star swaggered onto the stage. Unfriended, meaning without friends. A stranger, unguided and unfriended. Cheap. Now this had the meaning of a low price, but Shakespeare was the first to use it to mean of low quality or of little value.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while Denny speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day.
But not all of the words that Shakespeare invented caught on. Do you know Kicky Wicky, which means a housewife? He wears his honour in a box unseen that hugs his Kicky Wicky here at home. Slugabed, from Romeo and Juliet. A tanneling, someone who has been tanned by the sun. Here's a modern example. Are the tannelings back from their summer break in Ibiza, I see? And a few words by Shakespeare now carry a different meaning. So, for example, meat could be a meal or any type of food. That's meat and drink to me now. Naughty meant wicked and evil. Go hang yourself, you naughty, mocking uncle. Silly, in Shakespeare's time, silly meant innocent, pitiable, or helpless. A silly answer, and fitting well a sheep. Occasionally there is a word that Shakespeare uses where he is the only source. This is the case with Hebenon, the poison that killed Hamlet's father. And to this day, we don't know what it is. But if you come across a bottle in your attic, don't drink it. Here are some idioms that are still commonly used today that come to us from Shakespeare. Once again, the numbers attributed to him is often inflated. There are many idioms that have been attributed to Shakespeare but are in fact much older, and they'll be featured in another video. Just to give you one example, flesh and blood, which is on many of the lists of idioms that Shakespeare coined, but he didn't. It's been around since at least 1000 from an Anglo-Saxon translation of the Bible, and just means somebody of your family. In stitches, from Twelfth Night. In stitches means so funny that it hurts. And you might say, I was in stitches, or it had me in stitches. Here's a modern example. I saw that new play, The Trumpet Player in the Cat's Pajamas. It was so funny, it had me in stitches. In a pickle. In a pickle just means in a difficult situation. Some of Shakespeare's contemporaries also used this one, but his is the first in print, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So from The Tempest, how camest thou in this pickle? So a modern example would be, I'm in a pickle, I've got to get to the wedding, but all the flights from the airport have been cancelled due to bad weather. What shall I do? Salad days. And this means the time when you're young. Imagine a salad. It doesn't stay fresh for very long. And it's from Antony and Cleopatra. Cleopatra says to Julius Caesar, my salad days, when I was green in judgment, cold in blood. And the modern example, sometimes we would stay up all night drinking and chatting, but that was in my salad days. I'm far too sensible now. To send somebody packing, first used in Henry IV, and it means tell someone to go away or to get lost. And a modern example, when I found out the nasty things he'd been saying about me, I sent him packing. Heart of gold, this comes from Henry V. The king's a bowcock and a heart of gold, a lad of life, an imp of fame. A bowcock, by the way, means a fine fellow, but is now obsolete. It comes from French, bow and cock. A modern example of heart of gold, not bowcock. It's true that she's sometimes rude and bad tempers, but she has a heart of gold. To wear your heart on your sleeve. This means to be completely open about your feelings and your emotions. Shakespeare used it in Othello in 1604, but here is a modern example. We always know how her relationship is going. She wears her heart on her sleeve. To give the devil his due. You say this about a person you don't like who has some positive qualities. He was a horrible person, but to give the devil his due, he was a great songwriter. This one was first used by Shakespeare, but it was written in the play within quotation marks, so it's probably one that had already been in common use for some time. If you want to know more idioms, more grammar, more of everything, then consider joining my Patreon page. Link in the description. If you haven't read much Shakespeare before, then this will help. A few words and expressions common in early modern English. In modern English, we only have one form of you. In French, you have tu and vous, and Spanish, tu and usted. And in English, during Shakespeare's time, you had thou and you, and also ye. These are the subject pronouns, the person or persons doing the action. Now, thou is the informal form. For example, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? To speak to someone more formally, you could use you or ye. In earlier centuries, these words were different. You was used as the formal singular and object plural pronoun, and ye was a plural subject pronoun. But by 1600, these nuances had largely died out, and both words were used interchangeably, as is attested by these Shakespearean examples. Let's look at the object pronouns. You have the familiar form, which was thee. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And once again, you have you or ye as the formal singular and a plural. For example, though you did love this youth, I blame ye not. Thy and thine were both possessives, the equivalent of your. Thine was usually found before a vowel, for example, such friends or thine enemies. Thy was usually found before a consonant, but not always, as you can see from this quote. I will live in thy heart, die in thy lap, and be buried in thy eyes. Thine also meant yours. That coffee is thine, not mine. Thou forms are conjugated differently from the verb to be, I am, you are, but thou art. TH is the third person singular, so hath and doth instead of has and does, although Shakespeare used both forms. Forsooth means indeed, or it's true. Forsooth, he hath but a little wee face, with a little yellow beard. Yonder means over there. What light from yonder window breaks? Wherefore? Now this doesn't mean where. Many native English speakers mistake this one. Wherefore means why or how come. So Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo means Romeo, how come you are Romeo, and not where are you Romeo? And from Hamlet, I have of late, wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth. And in modern English, that would be, I haven't been happy recently, and I don't know why. You might see lo, which is to draw attention to something, a bit like hey. So hey you becomes lo thee in Shakespeare. Lo is still used today in the expression lo and behold to show surprise. I was about to give up when lo and behold an email arrived with a fantastic offer. Yeah. And now, just for a bit of fun, here are a few insults that Shakespeare used and that you can use too with your boss or whoever's giving you grief. Why, what's the matter that you have such a February face, so full of frost, of storm and cloudiness? His wit is as thick as Tewkesbury mustard. More of your conversation would infect my brain. Thou art unfit for any place but hell. Your brain is as dry as the remainder biscuit after voyage. I do desire that we may be better strangers. Though damned and luxurious mountain goat, truly thou art damned like an ill-roasted egg all on one side. Out of my sight, thou dost infect mine eyes. You Banbury cheese, get thee to a nunnery. Now in Shakespeare's time, nunnery carried the double meaning of a brothel. And just to even things out, here are a few chat-up lines. I will live in thy heart, die in thy lap, and be buried in thy eyes. When I exit, I hope I'll be pursued by you. If thou hast sinned, teach me. Let me take you a buttonhole lower. You have witchcraft in your lips. Your bum is the greatest thing about you. What is your parentage? Lady, shall I lie in your lap? Goddess, nymph, perfect, divine. One half of me is yours, the other half yours. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape. Give me my sin again. And now, was Shakespeare Shakespeare? Well, the short answer is yes. And the long answer is also yes. Let's just look at the facts. We know a lot about Shakespeare. We know where he was born, whom he married, how many children he had. We know his friends, his acquaintances, who he collaborated with, where he died, and what's in his will. In addition, there are 100 records, approximately, that bear his name. We know many of the places he lived in London. See my other video about that. We know his friends. We know he was an actor and a businessman. We know he performed before the monarch on several occasions. Shakespeare was a famous playwright in his own lifetime. He died in 1660, and for 250 years, nobody ever doubted that Shakespeare was Shakespeare until this woman, Delia Salter Bacon, who wrote The Philosophy of the Plays of Shakespeare Unfolded in 1857. Her argument goes that Shakespeare couldn't have written Shakespeare because he wasn't posh enough. His plays deal with monarchs and power and other stuff that no middle-class oik like Shakespeare could possibly know. No, they must have been written by someone from the aristocracy, somebody with culture. I mean, Shakespeare didn't even go to Oxford or Cambridge. Didn't go to Cambridge. She proposed Sir Walter Raleigh, an Oxford man, Edmund Spenser, a Cambridge man, and Francis Bacon, no relation, as the true authors. Delia Bacon suffered from mental illness and was eventually committed to an insane asylum. However, in the 19th century, she started to be taken seriously, and other names were proposed. Christopher Marlowe. And since the 1920s, a full 300 years after Shakespeare died, another nobleman was proposed, Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, in a book by John Thomas Looney, I'm not making this up, called Shakespeare Identified. Okay, putting my opinions aside, let's look at the facts. There are three main candidates proposed as Shakespeare. And if you look at this Wikipedia page, hundreds more, and we don't have time to go through all of them today. So we'll look at the three main candidates: Christopher Marlowe, Francis Bacon, and Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. Let's look at Christopher Marlowe. He wrote many plays under his own name, and he went to Cambridge. Unlike the illiterate pleb Shakespeare, who didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. Didn't go to Cambridge? Now, why would he want to publish his best plays under someone else's name? It doesn't make much sense. And anyway, he died in 1593, before most of Shakespeare's masterpieces had been written, so we can rule him out. Francis Bacon. Now, he had a lot of his own hit plays, and it's argued that he wrote Shakespeare's plays too. Bacon went to Cambridge, unlike that artless parvenu Shakespeare, who didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge.
You don't say.
Our writing is as unique as our fingerprint. We can determine with certainty whether two writers were written by the same person. You can do a stylometric analysis, a syntactic analysis, and a textual analysis, and more. And Shakespeare's plays were not written by Bacon. To give just one example, this is quoted in Bill Bryson's book, they compared the use of the word also. And in all his works, Shakespeare only used this word 36 times in all his plays, while Bacon used the word also almost that many times on a single page. And this is just one example. In short, the science says that Bacon did not write Shakespeare's plays. Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford. He ticks all the boxes. He's a member of the upper classes. He's rich. He has a literary background. And he went to Oxford. Unlike that upstart crow Shakespeare, who didn't go to Cambridge or Oxford.
On the level.
He published a number of mediocre quality poems in his lifetime. C.S. Lewis wrote that de Vere's poetry shows a faint talent, but is for the most part undistinguished and verbose. Now, why would he publish bad poetry under his own name, but the good stuff under a pseudonym? Doesn't make much sense. But if that's not enough, once again, textual analysis tells us De Vere didn't write Shakespeare. And if that's not enough, De Vere died in 1606 before many of Shakespeare's greatest works were written. So that's that theory down the Swanee. And if that's not enough, we could point to the fact that Shakespeare, in fact, wasn't very good at geography. In Two Gentlemen of Verona, his character Valentine talks about travelling from Verona to Milan by ship. Neither of these cities is by the coast. Was there a canal that connected the two cities? Well, there's no evidence of it. What has this got to do with De Vere? Well, he spoke Italian, he lived in Italy for a number of years, and he also lived in Verona. He would have known some basic facts about the Italian cities. Shakespeare's play Measure for Measure is set in Vienna, and yet the characters have Italian names. Elizabethan audiences wouldn't have cared about this, but De Vere, who travelled widely, wouldn't have made this mistake. So Shakespeare was none other than Shakespeare. Why do we still read Shakespeare? Of course, it's the beauty of the language, the eloquence and poetry of his writing is like no other, except perhaps maybe Dylan, but we'll talk about him another time. Then there are his works that deal with timeless themes of love, jealousy, revenge, ambition, power, mortality, to name just a few. Shakespeare has a profound knowledge of human nature, and whatever is happening in the world, whether it be conflict in the Middle East or trouble in your relationship, you can be sure that Shakespeare has something relevant to say on the matter. And it is extraordinary to think that even though he died more than 400 years ago, English speakers across the world use words and expressions in their everyday lives invented by Shakespeare, and usually they don't even realise it. Did this video bring us thou mirth and laughter? If so, cheer thy heart by subscribing, and if you're interested in the history of the English language, then do sign up to my newsletter, link in the description. With that, my play is done. I shall vanish into thin air. Stay mellow. Adieu.